guys, Andrea Mills here. Today I wanted to do a pregnancy update. I'm a little bit later than I meant to be on this, but I've been so busy doing other things I hadn't had time to just sit down and visit with you guys. So in case this is your first time watching, Tom and I have 8 children and we're expecting our 9th baby in the beginning of the spring. And if you didn't see our ultrasound video from a few weeks ago, we're going to have a girl this time. So that will make 5 boys and 4 girls for us. We're planning to do an unassisted birth again this time, and we're doing an unassisted pregnancy. I don't know if those are the best terms for that, but that's generally what people call it. So I did my monthly checkup for myself and everything is looking good. Baby is growing. Her heart rate is staying steady at about 144. I finally gained 3 pounds, so I haven't, I've been kind of at a loss slightly this whole pregnancy, which is the same way I was with my last 2 pregnancies, but this time I'm finally up 3 pounds, so we're kind of going on the uphill trend now. Her little kicks are getting really strong. It's very easy for everyone else to put their hand on my belly now and feel her kicking. And when we had the ultrasound, she was laying transverse, so she was sideways, right down low at the bottom. But a couple days after the ultrasound, we were sitting there eating dinner and she got really crazy kicking and things. I told Tom she must have been hungry and really enjoying what we were eating for dinner, because she just was like wild there for a little while. And then later I realized, oh, she's flipped. So now she's in the head down position and all of her kicks, they're still kind of all over, but instead of being by my hips with her hands on one side and feet on the other, she's now head down, and so lots of the kicks are way up high at the top now, and I can feel all those little tiny movements down there at the bottom, and it was just neat to actually realize when that happened. Now, a lot of you have asked for a copy of my chart that I made to keep track of what I'm eating so that I can make sure that I'm eating enough of everything. So I finally got one of these on my blog, so you can go there and print one out if you want to. It's based on the Dr. Brewer pregnancy diet, and it looks slightly different than mine does because I tried to make it a little more generic than my own. But you can print it out. I made one for a singleton pregnancy and one for twins, so you can print whichever one you want. It's the PDF copy that I put on there has some little white lines, and it's better than the original one that I got, but I still couldn't get it perfect. So I was looking to see what to do about that, and I couldn't ever find any answers on how to definitively make my PDF stop having those lines. So it's not going to be awesome, but it's still available if you want to use it. And I have mine laminated. I use my laminating machine at home, and then I use a dry erase marker to mark everything as I eat it. If you don't have a laminating machine, you can take it into a teacher supply store or an office supply store and they'll laminate it for you. Or you could use those sheet protectors for 3-ring binders. You just slide it in there and that'll work like it's laminated. You can just write on the sheet protector, or you can use clear packing tape like you use to mail packages and just cover the whole thing with that. So any of those things would work to laminate it, and then you can use dry erase marker and keep track of your own pregnancy diet. I don't remember if I mentioned that I'm 24 weeks now. I don't know. My brain is scattered. I am definitely having pregnancy brain. It used to take me, I like to do little Sudoku, however you say it, puzzles on my phone sometimes, and prior to being pregnant I could finish one at the expert level in 6 to 8 minutes. Now it's taking me I don't know, 10, 15, even 20 minutes to finish a puzzle, and I'm making so many more mistakes than I normally do, and I'm like, oh, my brain, I can't hold the numbers in there. And it's funny because the only time Tom can beat me at Boggle is when I'm pregnant or right after I've had a baby. So the other day when I was struggling with my Sudoku, I said, it's time to get out Boggle and play because he could win now. I thought I would show you guys some of the things that we've picked up for the baby so far. I will probably do another video later showing everything that we've prepared for her when it's all done and ready, but I'll still show you little snippets along the way of what we're doing. So if you watch the ultrasound video, we went to Hobby Lobby after the ultrasound to pick out some fabric for a baby blanket, and I picked out some owl fabric, but I wasn't totally happy with it. It's just they didn't have a lot of choices. So a few days later, Tom and I went out while we were on our date night, and we went to Joann Fabrics and we picked out a bunch more fabric. So I'm going to show you now what we picked for her. So we organized all of the kids by color, and this baby, who we do not have a name for yet, is going to be red, and I just know from experience that may either end up being red sometimes or like a hot pink, just depending on what it is that we got. So I wanted to use both of those colors in the fabrics that I chose for her. So I picked this pretty floral fabric to make the sheets for her Moses basket that she'll sleep in, and so it's kind of got a dark red and some pink in that. And then we chose these 3 fabrics to make the receiving blankets out of, and you'll see that there's red and pink in this one, and then these 2 were just to kind of coordinate with this one. And then here's the new fabric I picked for her big fleece blanket. So it's got this dark reddish pink color, and then we got the pink kind of furry fleece for the back of it. And if you watch my monthly Walmart video, you saw that I picked up these little nightgowns for her to wear for the first month or so, and we got her some plain white sockies. I call this piece of furniture the baby dresser, and we got all of the new baby diapers sitting here, and they're so tiny. And then her new wipes are here. They're still wrapped up though. And these were Claudia's receiving blankets, but when I get the new ones sewn for the new baby, we'll put those right there. I'll let the little girls have these to play, or at least 1 or 2 of them to play with their dolls then. All of the fabrics are now going to sit here on the shelf, which is where they just were, until it's time to sew everything. Probably in February, I think I'm going to do all of the baby videos. So we'll do a baby Q&A video then, and all the preparations for the baby, the sewing projects that I'm doing, I'll do the how-tos for those, and just answer more questions specifically about birth and pregnancy and things like that during the month of February. That's my plan anyways. So a couple of things happened this month that I wanted to share with you, and I want to assure you that I'm fine beforehand, because I'm sure in the comments you're all gonna be worrying about me, and everything is completely fine. It's only marginally pregnancy related, but it put in mind a bigger topic I would like to talk about. And as I said, my brain feels scattered, so I just prayed, Lord, please help me get this message out the way you want it to come out, because I have all these thoughts of what I want to share with you, and I don't know if my scattered brain is going to be able to say it the way I want to say it, or remember everything I wanted to say. So I hope this all comes out the way that I want it to. But I mentioned before that I don't really have much like morning sickness or anything with my pregnancies, but I do have what I called mental nausea, and that I am way more sensitive to ideas when I'm pregnant that will make me sick. So, in my early pregnancies, I mentioned how making a grocery list or looking at a grocery store sale flyer would make me sick, and just watching a movie or something, if something gross happens, I have a much more severe reaction to it. So this month, I passed out and I threw up, both because of mental ideas. Neither one of them had to do with anything physically going on with me. With the fainting incident, I was reading something that was very traumatic, and that's traumatic, not dramatic, although, well, anyways, it was not fiction. It was a non-fiction book I was reading, and there was a medical trauma being described in this book, and it, I don't know, it just affected me. And I was actually sitting in the bath when it happened, and I'm reading this story, and I'm like, oh my goodness, my ears started ringing, and I'm thinking that I passed out before when I was younger several times, and I thought, this is making me feel like I'm going into shock almost just reading this story. And I thought, I feel like I'm going to pass out, and Sophia was in the bathroom with me. She's 3, and she's chattering away, and I'm like, just stop thinking about the story. Just think about what she's saying. But then all of a sudden I just felt the blood just drain out of my face. It just I just felt it. And that's when I thought, I really seriously feel like I'm going to pass out. I need to get out of the bathtub. So I got out of the tub and put on a towel, and I came out to my room and I sat down on the edge of the bed, and just then Thomas comes along, my 15-year-old son, and I said, Thomas, I feel like I'm going to pass out. And he says something to me, and I realize I can't really hear what he's saying because my ears are ringing so loud I can't hear. And I'm like, yes, this is exactly what happens when you pass out. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not kidding, go get Dad. And poof, down onto the floor I went. And it was so dumb, I couldn't believe it. And so as soon as I landed on the floor, which I didn't hit anything, I was fine, nothing was injured at all, but I was kind of head down and I felt all the blood just rushing back to my head, and immediately started feeling better. So by the time Tom got upstairs and came in, he's like, you know, are you okay? And I started laughing, and I'm like, I cannot believe that I just passed out because I read something that was so traumatic, and you know, it was very vividly described that it literally made me pass out. Like, I literally went into shock just from the thought of it. And yeah, anyways, the next day I was reading the book again, and I came along to another story, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should read this one. And Tom's like, if you pass out from reading that book again, I'm gonna burn that book. But I just skipped the story that time because I didn't want any more trauma. And the other one was something when I threw up, was just somebody said something that made me feel grossed out, and I started retching, and I'm like, okay, get it together, it's fine. But I couldn't, and then I saw something gross right after that, and then I saw a second gross thing, and it was all over. None of those things would normally bother me, but it was all over. I ended up throwing up all the good food that I just ate for supper, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is so dumb. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just all in my mind, and it was all over. So those two incidents happened, and again, I'm fine. I was fine the whole time, so no one needs to worry that there's something wrong or anything like that, because it's nothing like that. But then a few days ago we went to the movie, and before the movie they always play local ads on the screen, and this ad came up, and this ties into what I want to talk about. And the ad was for a local doctor's office, and the big words said, it had a picture of a family of 4, 2 parents, 2 kids, and it said, already have the perfect family, we'll help you keep it that way. And then it was advertising for their vasectomy services. And Tom didn't see it, so I told him what it said, and we were just talking about the sadness of that idea that having another child would be making a perfect family imperfect. So all of these topics are related to what I'm going to call a Genjutsu. And we watched the Japanese anime cartoon Naruto, and some of the ninjas in Naruto have this ninja ability to weave Genjutsu over people, which means that they can like create a false reality, and so the person they're fighting thinks that they're fighting in one situation, but the reality is they're just like living this, you know, there's like this alternate world that's been put in front of them, and so they don't realize that nothing is actually happening that they think is happening, and so they make different decisions than they would have made otherwise, and it's just, you know, it creates this false reality around them. And much the same way that the ideas that came into my head created a false reality that my body reacted to. And then with this whole vasectomy thing, that's, I guess, the real crux of it, is how the words that people say do create a perception of a reality that is not necessarily true. When we talk about like the word speak, the word spiel is related to the word spelling, that writing down words, or the words that we say, they're creative in the sense that they create ideas in our minds, and it's not changing the physical reality. And that's a dispute that I have with some things that were being taught in our church that we left, and I think probably in other churches too, of this idea of speaking things out and changing reality or changing our circumstances and things like that. And I don't mean that at all when I'm saying this. I don't mean at all that we have the creative power that God had, that He actually created things with His words. We don't have that creative power. We have the creative power to create perception with our words. This, I don't know, not spiritual's not even really quite the right word, but just how we perceive the world around us. It doesn't literally alter it, but it can alter our interaction with it. So in that sense, I guess it can change the world around us, but not in a literal sense. In fact, in the book of Lamentations, it says, "Who can speak and have it happen if the Lord has not decreed it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that both calamities and good things come?" And that the idea that we can force God to do things, or we can change things with what we say, is only true to the extent that God Himself has decreed these things to happen. And we can't prevent bad things from happening just because we want it to. That's, the Bible says actually in several places in the New Testament that if God considers you a son, then He will discipline you. And that can mean punishment for doing wrong, but also is the idea that we go through difficult, hard things to learn whatever character that it is that He wants us to learn. He's disciplining us, discipling us, turning us into the kind of people He wants us to be. And we don't want to change that. We don't want to do away with the bad things in our life. So I just want to be clear, when I'm talking about our words and speaking, I don't mean controlling God. I don't mean controlling reality. I don't mean trying to only have good things in my life, or forcing God to do things the way I want them to be done. I mean that it alters our faith and our perception of the life that we're living. And an example of this is one time we were going, I may have shared this before, but one time we were all driving somewhere to take the kids to this place, and my parents were in a car, Tom and I were in our car with our kids, my brother and his wife were in their car with their kids, so we had the 3 vehicles going, and we come across a pickup truck that was driving down the road that had a dog in the back, and the dog was running back and forth across the bed of the truck, and he would stick his head out one side, then he'd stick his head out the other side. And when Tom saw it, he says, "Look at how much fun that dog is having," because he'd stick his head out and all the wind's blowing against him, then he'd run to the other side and he'd do it again. And so we were having this pleasant thought of this dog really enjoying this ride in the wind. And when we arrived, my mom says, "Did you guys see that dog? He was so afraid." And and I thought, how is it that we saw the same thing, but we had such different perceptions of what was going on with this dog? And I don't know what the dog was feeling. But the reality was one thing. The dog was running back and forth, sticking his head out. What we perceived about that was completely different. So much of what is put in front of us, is said to us, is advertised to us. The ideas that are bequeathed to us are a Genjutsu that's kind of weaving this reality that's making us have a perception about the world that may or may not be true. This is something that I've tried many times unsuccessfully, but I try to always think about what the truth is and make, find an anchor to hang on to make decisions by. And when we first got our Oculus Rift, which is a virtual reality game, the first time Tom had me put it on, I was on this city balcony thing, and you could walk up to the edge, and I was afraid to. I was like, I don't want to go look over the edge of that thing. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? I know this isn't real. There's no harm that can come to me from this. Yet I felt fear because I had this false reality put in front of my eyes that seemed to be real, but it wasn't. So the next time I put it on, it was actually a game that he wanted me to play, And as soon as I started, it was one of those worlds where you can fall off the edges of things. I ran straight for the edge and I jumped off, and Tom stopped it before I fell and restarted the game. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I need to remind myself that this isn't real and I'm not going to be afraid of falling off the edge." So he started the game back up again, and I did. I ran straight for the edge and I jumped off, and you know, everything's fine. I start back over again. But I thought, I don't want this Genjutsu to control my emotions and make me act in a way that is silly, is what it boils down to. And in the context of, birth, there's three, or family, I guess, in general, there's three areas that I think we've all had such a huge Genjutsu, or a huge spell, if you want to say it that way, cast over us that makes us operate in ways that we don't have to. And the first one is that vasectomy ad of the spell that's cast over us that having children in some way ruins our lives, and that the more of them we have, the worse we are. So we are going to not have enough money, we're not going to be able to do the things we want to do, we're not going to be able to care for each of them in the way that we're supposed to care for them. And I just think what a false idea that is, but it really affects our lives, because we, for one, we see all the time, on TV or whatever, that just like that picture on that ad, that it's a 2 parents, 2 kids, like that's the picture of a normal family, and that's the perfect family. If we have a 3rd child, our family has now become imperfect. Heaven forbid a 9th child. How imperfect is that family, And I think how many people I talk to that say they wish they'd had more, they like to have more, they know in their hearts that isn't true, that their family isn't less perfect the more they have. They know that having more children brings more joy. It changes who you are. It refines you and makes you a better person the more selfless you have to become. But yet, the Genjutsu is so strong that there's so much fear that so many times people don't do it, even though there's that part of them that knows that that's what they should do. And the next one is in the idea of birth. So even if you become pregnant, there's the Genjutsu that's woven around that what you're doing, what you're undertaking, is an extremely dangerous function, I guess. And if you don't have commercial professional care, there's an extremely good likelihood that you will be damaged, or the baby will be damaged, or you will die, or the baby will die. And it makes us cooperate with things that I think we would find objectionable in any normal circumstances if we didn't sincerely believe that this was necessary. I'm not saying that nothing bad ever happens, because it does. I am saying that it's a false belief that you can prevent harm, and that is true no matter where the baby is born or in whose presence it is birthed. And there are things that I think, when we think of burying our bodies, being naked in front of a stranger, we would find that a very objectionable thing. Or letting a stranger, or anyone other than our spouse, put their hands in private areas of our bodies or on our bodies in a private way, we would think that was an assault under normal circumstances. Having someone poke needles into us, or cut us with knives, or drug us, or drug our babies. All of those things are things that we would think were really bad if we didn't sincerely believe that it was necessary to preserve our lives. And I would just like to challenge that idea that genjutsu, I guess, that is true. The third area is in the area of raising our children. And, we choose to keep our kids at home with us. We don't send them to school. As I've mentioned, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to doctors and hospital births, just so you know. I'm not opposed to people sending their kids to school. But it's just the idea that that's the default method. That's because of the faith that we've been given, or the belief system we've been given. And that I see schools as a surrogate family for our kids. And we're given the belief that we can't provide all that our children need, and we need someone professional. We need commercial care for them. And because of our fears, we do what is actually a pretty unnatural act in all of those ways. We behave in very unnatural ways because we believe that that's the right thing. And it's so hard to know what's right or wrong when you're living in this false reality. When the little ninja's fighting in the Genjutsu, he has no idea he's in a Genjutsu. So of course he's making the decisions he does because he's basing it on what he sees around him. And it's not until he's far into it that he realizes, oh my gosh, this isn't even real. And, from way back at this point, I've been doing all these things that had no benefit to me and maybe caused me harm because I didn't see or understand where I actually was. And it reminds me of the movie Inception. And how, if you've ever watched that movie, they go into into people's dreams, basically. And they can, influence people's dreams. But the danger for them is that when they're in someone's dream, they can forget that it's a dream themselves. And so each one of them has something that they do to help remind them that this is a dream. And so the main character has a little top thing that he would spin. And if it doesn't fall, he knows that he's in a dream, so he can remember where he's actually at. And that's kind of, I guess, the whole point of what I'm saying here is that for me, I go back to what God designed in the first place. And, when God made the first man and the first woman, he designed them and actually told them to be fruitful and multiply. And having children is not going to ruin your life. It's not going to ruin your perfect family to have more of them. It's the natural course of events for a husband and wife to procreate, and there's a natural ending to that point of their lives, and there's no reason to be afraid of it. There's no reason to be afraid that God's not going to provide for you. Now, there was a woman who told me recently that we had too many kids. This was, here on YouTube, where people are so kind and think so clearly about things before they say them. But she told me that there are basic needs in the year 2017, and there's no way we could possibly provide those things for our kids, so we shouldn't have so many. And I responded and said, it doesn't matter if it's 2017 or 1017. A basic need is a basic need. So if you can't see that, you're in a Genjutsu. That's what it is. So if you think that say a college education or a certain brand of clothes or certain paraphernalia, phones or clubs like being involved in extracurricular activities, not like hitting somebody with a club, having your own bedroom, all of these things, if you think those things are basic needs, you are in a Genjutsu and don't understand what a basic need is. A basic need is food, shelter, clothing, a family, love. Those are basic needs. And that was the same no matter what point in history you have been born. That's a basic need. And just because everyone around you has created a Genjutsu that tells you all this other stuff is a basic need doesn't mean it's true. And so I like to go back and say, how did God design it? Did God design us to need all this stuff, to keep up with the Joneses, to participate in all these systems and institutions that are prevalent in our era. He didn't design us for that. There's nothing wrong with participating or taking part in that stuff, but it's not a basic need. And making a decision to deny someone a life because you want to give someone else something that is an extra frill, to me, is a sad way to make a decision. It's that fighting in the Genjutsu against something that's not even real because you believe this false reality. You believe these things are actually necessary, and they're not. The next one being the birth. This is probably the one that gets the most, I don't know, anxiety and fear and actually anger out of people, is having a baby without commercial care. The reality is God did not design anyone, any woman, any female of any species to need someone else present for her to birth. I think it's wonderful to have support from your husband, especially because he knows you like no one else knows you. He can see what's going on with you, and he's going to give the kind of assistance that's the ideal kind of assistance during that situation. There's this idea, this genjutsu that's been woven, that birth is inherently dangerous, but when you actually look at the history of birth, many of the births of the women who died, it was not from the birth itself. It was from disease that they got from the hospitals. And even currently, like I talked about with Claudia's birth, they gave me Pitocin to induce my labor, even though it explicitly says that you should never do that in a woman who's had more than 5 babies, because it's a huge risk of hemorrhage. Nobody told me that, and I believe wholeheartedly that if I had had a hemorrhage, they would have probably said it was because of my advanced maternal age, not because of the Pitocin. And I just think what a genjutsu we all have, that we literally think birth is deadly and we have to have some sort of outside assistance or something terrible is going to happen. And again, I'm not denying the reality that sometimes bad things do happen, but that's still the case no matter where you have your baby. And I think how many women tell me things like, if I hadn't been in the hospital, I would have died, or my baby would have died. And I don't know what the actual circumstances were for any of these people, so maybe that's true. But I also see how much, just like I said with my situation, that I believe medical professionals are doing what they believe to be the best thing for us. I don't think there's any malice on their part or ill will. I think they are also under this genjutsu, and so they make decisions for us that in reality put us in harm's way in an effort to keep us from harm. We perpetuate that because they sincerely believe what they believe, and so they tell us things like we would have died if, not realizing that maybe we would have never been in a dangerous situation in the first place if we hadn't been there. And then we perpetuate that right along with them by saying this to other women, that I would have died, therefore, implying you might die also if you are not in their care. I was really sad that we ended up at the hospital with Claudia and being put in these kind of dangerous situations that we were, because I knew in my heart, and Tom knew in his heart, that we were going to be fine, and there was no reason for it. But that genjutsu was still so strong over us, and there's people that were very close to us that were still casting that spell over us, saying those words that made us make decisions that were against what we knew was the right thing. And for all of us, I hope the day comes when we can make decisions about where we birth our babies based on what God is putting on our heart to do, and not what the Genjutsu is telling us to do, wherever that is, whether that's at the hospital or at home, whether it's with a midwife or without a midwife, that we're doing it because that's what we sincerely know God wants us to do, and not because we're afraid and this Genjutsu is kind of forcing us into that situation out of fear. And the third one, the homeschooling, or whatever. I don't even like to use that term, but that's what everybody says, because that implies that we have brought school home and that we're the substitute for the school, when the reality is it's the other way around. Or when I look back at how God designed family to be, He designed, whether you're a cat, whether you're a human, He designed families to raise their children. And so, whether that includes teaching them how to walk, or teaching them how to read, or whatever else it is, there's no reason, there's no basic reason why we can't do the job ourselves. It won't look like what it looks like in a school setting, but that's okay. That's just a Genjutsu that tells us that that's education and that's necessary, and what we do at home is lesser than what happens in a school. I don't know if any of this is coming out the way that I hope that it does. A lot of my hesitancy is because I don't want to be offensive to any of you. I don't want any of you to think that I am judging you for the choices you make or whatever, because that's not at all what I'm trying to do here. I just want to share with you that it's okay to question this reality that's been cast over us, and to make decisions that other people don't make. And we don't need to be afraid to. The only thing we need to be afraid of is not doing what God wants us to do, and going against the grain of everyone else that's still part of the Genjutsu. That's okay. They're not going to get it. They're not going to understand. They're going to think you're crazy. They're going to think you're dangerous. They're going to think you're foolish. But the reality is, like, and I don't remember where it says it, but that the wisdom of man is foolish to God, but God's wisdom is foolishness to men. And so my encouragement, I guess, is to find that truth, find that anchor. To me, it's, what did God design in the first place? How did He intend for this to happen? Regardless of how it's been done, historically or currently, what was the original way He designed us to operate, and do it that way, whatever the circumstances. Like I said, it doesn't mean that we're not going to that we're going to prevent every bad thing from happening, because that's not the point. The point of life isn't to avoid harm. It's not to avoid difficulty. Sometimes people die. Sometimes kids rebel. Sometimes kids fail at life. Sometimes adults fail at life. Whatever that means even. I don't even know what that means for sure. That could just be something that is another Genjutsu that I'm just realizing. But bad things happen and good things happen. I want to be a person who's willing to jump off the edge of the game board and realize it's going to be okay. Whatever happens is God's will, and He's the one that I need to be listening to when I make these decisions. I need to be aware that I will always live in a Genjutsu. There will always be spells being cast over me, whether I'm sitting in a movie theater, or I'm reading a book, or I'm talking to someone. There's always going to be these ideas that are trying to weave this reality around me, or to weave this belief system around me. But if I can find my anchor, just like find my spinning top, if I can find that thing that I can go back to every time and make my decisions based on that principle, that truth, then I can trust that whatever the outcome is, that's the outcome that God intended for me, good or bad, to teach me what He wanted to teach me, or to teach others what He wanted me to teach them. In the end, everything in this world is temporary. Living with an eye for eternal things is of utmost importance. And so I guess, I don't know if any of that's coming out right, but that's my encouragement for you today. I just want to thank you all for coming over and spending this time with me this afternoon or evening or morning, whenever it is that you're watching this. And thank you guys all for just being so kind and concerned about us. And I guess I'll talk to you again soon.